Okay, well that's a little intro into my topic today, because in that we're in the season of nonviolence, the topic is target practice. So that can conjure up a lot of ideas if you're thinking, what are these people talking about? Target practice in a season for nonviolence? So when you hear target practice, what kind of a perception does that bring to your mind?
Archery.
Okay, we got gun, we got archery, and guns, you know, whenever I see that, I don't see the old West ones blowing up bottles. You see the ones with the police, and they got some guy there, and they're peppering them full of holes there on the target range, right? So, you know, target practice, and just like everything else in life, we've got to do target practice. We've got to target in on things. And one of the things, I'm just going through one of my programs right now, and one of the big things I'm really big on is your initial perception is simply that. Your initial perception of anything. And if you want to get real clear on what's really going on in life, then you have to step outside the grid. The grid is your initial perception in anything. However, outside the grid is looking at that and seeing other possibilities. So for example, if you're stuck in the grid in a season for nonviolence, target practice doesn't seem to go. However, target practice in context of what we're doing here, outside the grid, is looking at stepping outside the comfort zone. Looking at going beyond where we are now, into new and different type of experiences. So not only being able to target outside of that, but then to have the courage and the strength and the willingness to deal with whatever it is that we need to deal with to achieve that. However, there's one more important step that's even more important than that. And that is becoming the person that we need to become in order to have the experience that we desire to have. And in order to become that person, we need to develop that inside of ourselves in consciousness. So it's not only a mental thing, it's not only an emotional thing, it's not only a physical thing, it's a spiritual thing. And so that's what all of this is about, target practice. So one of the things that Stacy mentioned when it conjured up in her mind is archery. And really, that's where I want to start with this idea of target practice. Because there is a word that, if I mentioned it, would conjure up, and I'm going to mention, it would conjure up a lot of different things. If somebody said to you, sin, or that you have been a sinner, how would you feel? Well, based on the old context of what sin is, it probably wouldn't make people feel very good, and probably you would feel like you were being accused or blamed or pointed at. However, we have to go beyond our perception of established status quo and look at what was the real meaning behind that. And where did that come from? Well, it come from archery. In the Greek archery tournaments, you had the target away at the back, and the archers would sit there and draw their bow, and they would aim for the target. Now, not all of them hit the target or the rings. Lots of them missed. So in archery, if you miss the target altogether, it's called sin. So the word sin is an archery term that simply means that you've missed the mark. So really, in reality, it is not a bad word, and if you have sinned, it doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It just means you've missed the mark, you've missed the target. You've got a little detour, you've gone off track. Or you did something stupid. Okay? So let's leave stupid out of the environment, because we all know what happens when we do that. We all know that we do it, and you know it's going to happen again. So let's just talk about it in context of the positive things. So when you sin, that means you've got this idea about where you want to go outside the grid, and you start working towards it, and then you get distracted by those little subtle messages of why you can't do it. And if you buy into why you can't do it, that's what a sin is, because you missed the mark. Because that's something inside of you that is coming up that's a false belief that has no place in consciousness for you, because it won't serve the purpose. So sinning is just getting detoured or getting off the mark. And so what we want to do is we want to bring ourselves back into perspective, and we want to put ourselves in a place where we can accomplish a lot of our heart's desires. So for target practice, I got kind of a little bit of a do and don't list. But we're going to talk about the do list. And there's two parts to the do list. There's the one that we do real easy. That's the one where we think about what it is that we desire. We set a goal. And we take all those good goal-setting courses. And we're real clear. We define it. We in detail. And then we put a positive action plan down. And we start the plan. So everybody's done that on our desires. See, that's not the problem. That's not the problem with target practice, because we can target into it. When we are working there, the things that we've got to watch for and keep into perspective is our attitude, and we've got to watch for the blocks. And then when things get uncomfortable and we're challenging our belief system, we got to look for those other things. Well, you know, I tried it, but, or if only this would have worked this way, or if only that had happened, then I would have done it, but this didn't happen, so I didn't do it. Does anybody ever use ifs and buts? I have a little expression about that. If ifs and buts were candies and nuts, I guess it'd be time for Christmas. Okay? Yeah, so we got to get off our ifs and we got to get off our buts, because those are all legitimate rationalizations that we use out here for allowing us not to make that step and pursue our dreams when things become uncomfortable. Okay? So that's all a part of the outside, and I think we've all allowed ourselves to be stymied and stopped from accomplishing our heart's desire because we've given in to the ifs and the buts that are there. That's what we call conditions. However, in every endeavor, there's two sides to the story. There's the physical side about what we need to do out here, and we know what we need to do. We know that if we want to accomplish something, we set direction. Over 8 years ago, Ann and I sat down and we determined, based on the age of our grandchildren at that time, that in 8 years they were going to go to Disneyland in Southern California, and we're taking them to their Knott's Berry's Far, or not Knott's Berry, Universal, San Diego Zoo, SeaWorld, all of that. 8 years ago. And we put that intention out there, and we put that idea out there, and we didn't wait to start saving for it. We put a saving plan right in place 8.5 years ago, and we leave on June 16th with 6 grandchildren to Southern California, already all fully paid for. And a slush fund just in case, eh? Okay? Now, there are all kinds of other stumbling blocks that we're having right now. Okay? Some of them are called parents, or our children. But that's okay, we got the grandchildren working on them. So, you know, but there's always things like that, you know. There's always stumbling blocks. There's always things to come up to say no. There's always a reason to do it at a different time. And then there's a favorite. Here's a favorite when you start. This is where you really got to go outside the zone and do some real good target practice. I'm not ready. It starts to happen and I'm not ready. Do you know how much counseling I do for people who've got a really good idea, they get going and things start happening, but they're not ready yet? And they come and say, I don't know what to do. Oh, it's the shortest session I ever have. You know? I said, well, what's the problem? Well, this is what I wanted, and it's starting now, and I'm not ready. Excuse me, there's nothing more to talk about. You are. Well, how do you know? It's simple. It wouldn't be happening if you weren't ready. Okay? It's happening because you're ready. You don't think so when you examine condition. However, spirit doesn't look at condition because spirit knows more than condition. So you have to go outside the grid and realize, if I want this, it's happening, I must be ready or else it wouldn't happen. And you go, but. I hear that. That's just like one of those old cars that are puttering down the street. But. And but. And you know, the next step is I got to listen to all these buts. And then I always say, my last statement is, well, you just got to get off your butts and do it. Okay? Because that's what it is. I always have another thing I teach people too. It's easy to talk about something. I'm great at talking about it. I've never had a problem talking about it, defining it, planning it, laying it out. But my problem is oh my God, you mean I actually got to do it? And you see, talking about something is easy. But you go outside the grid when you start to do it. Different story, different energy, different feeling. Because while you're doing the talking, there's no problems. But you don't get into the do-do until you do the doing. And when you start doing the doing, then some of the do-do comes up, if you know what I mean. Okay? So, the toughest journey of all is not talking about it. It's not planning it, it's not visualizing, it's not creating the vision boards, the treasury maps, or doing all of that, or getting together and doing prayer and treatment or masterminding groups. Everybody could do that, and it's easy. Just a little bit of a time commitment, you know, and a little bit of work and visualization. However, nothing is really going to happen or ever be different or change unless we go off the grid with this. And we have to also accompany it with the spiritual part. The spiritual part has to be done, or else the physical part will never manifest into form. Never. It can't. So, what's the spiritual part? Give me something tangible to put my teeth into. Well, put your teeth into this if you could find it, because you can't find it and you can't see it. You have to have it. And you have to develop it. And you have to prove it, not to anybody else but to self. Are you ready? Here's the first thing that you got to work with. Faith. Well, I got faith. Okay. And this hits the fan, whatever you want to put in there. Let's see you step into it and have the faith to deal with it. There's that car again. Okay? Faith is easy to proclaim, but faith isn't a talking thing. It isn't a thinking thing. It's a doing thing. And, well, what do you mean doing? How do I have faith? That means being willing to eliminate all the protests and then to go to the next step, which is trust. Oh my God, faith and trust in the same hand? You got to have the faith in the spiritual power and presence, and you've got to trust in it. Okay, we like tangibles. We like to see markers along the way, but we don't get to see that. Is this new? Hey, no, it's not new. You could check the Old Testament 4,000 years ago when Moses led the people from slavery into freedom. Not a problem until they got to one point. Then the problem began, and this is where it is for you and I. They seen themselves going out of Egypt. They seen the Red Sea parting. They seen the lushness of the land of Midian. And they heard about the stories of the promised land, just like us. If we do these things, this is the wonderful results you'll get, the promised land. However, it's that last leg of the journey that we got to make. That is to go through the wilderness. Because you see, that's what Moses and the people had to do to get to the promised land. And that's what we have to do to get to the promised land too. And what is this wilderness or promised land? This is stepping it to the next level. This is taking it to the spiritual level. Because when you're going through the promised land, to the promised land through the wilderness, there are no markers on the desert. Oh, it's just another sand dune. That's all it is. How do we know? What are the guarantees? Well, there aren't any. Zero. You have to have faith. And then you have to trust. Easy words to use, very difficult to put into practice. And then you have to believe in what you're doing. Believing is not a statement. Believing is the energy attached to the statement. So sometimes we have to stop and say, what is it I believe in? Do I believe in the power of possibility? Or do I believe in the conditions out here that say no? Let me tell you a story, personal story, about what can happen when you have a desire and an intention and a commitment and you believe. And you're willing to step up to the plate with it. When I was stepping out of my past, one of the desires my partner and I had at the time was we had 3 girls. She had 2, I had 1. And we had a desire to adopt a couple of boys that were the same age as our girls. Now, being that I had the background I did, when I declared this to some friends, they just didn't believe it was possible. How can you, with that kind of a background, adopt any children? And we went to social services, and he said, well, there's probably not much chance, but best thing for you to do is to get in doing a social or a foster child program and work with it. And we did that, and we did the prayer, and we did the treatment work. And our defining moment was we'd like a couple of boys the same age as our girls with fair hair and blue eyes. Okay, right? So I stepped out of my experience in September of 1981. That's when I left it all behind, and that was the last thread. And so we worked on this, and we're taking courses and programs, not knowing how it would ever happen, but just believing it would. Having the trust and the faith, and everything out here said no. I mean, I had a criminal record. Okay? And everything out here said no. However, Spirit doesn't know no. It doesn't have no comprehension of that word. It only believes in possibility if you believe in it. So what we did was we kept doing that program, and then one evening a strange thing happened. I always watched the news at that time with Channel 4 or 5, Daryl Jans, because Daryl worked up at St. and I knew him from there. And I liked him. He's a nice man. And this one night, and this one night only, I had the wrong station on. It was a Wednesday night. And it was Channel 27. Channel 27 had a program on called Wednesday's Child for a number of years. And they would take kids that had some physical thing or something drastically wrong with them that put them in a category called high risk for nobody wanting to adopt them. And I'll be darned, the only time I saw that program this night, they had these 2 boys on there with fair hair and blue eyes and the same age as 2 of our daughters. So I'm in. So we put our application in. Now you got to realize, September to February is not a lot of time after 10 and a half years of being involved in that gang business. Okay, it's not much time. Anyhow, we were clear on our intention, where we were going, what we were doing, put the application in, went through the process, and I'll be darned if we didn't get shaken down to the last 3 couples. Wow. And now they were going to do the home study. Yeah, well, okay. So they come to the house, the social worker, and I'll never forget the day, because what am I going to say? How am I going to do this? You know, if you do the right centering, if your intention's correct, if you believe in what you're doing, and you come from truth, trust, honesty, and integrity, the Spirit will always give you the right way to approach it, in spite of what I thought. So there I am having this plan, and that's not what come out of my mouth. I go like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And so my opening statement was say, look, before we get started, here's the story. This is where I'm coming from. This is where I'm at now. And this is where I'm going. Okay? With this whole thing. And I told her right up front, because they're going to find out anyhow. And she go, okay, yeah, went on with the interview and everything like that. Got through, and the lady actually liked me, a very lovely lady. Not just because she liked me, but that helped. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, and then she come back and she said, we've selected you. Wow. But, there's that word again, but. The people up higher up are looking at your background and they're looking at this, because like I told her, I had a criminal record. I hadn't got it all pardoned yet, which it is now done, by the way, so that's not an issue. She said the people upstairs looked at this and they decided, it's just a little bit dicey. So what they did is they hired another independent consultant outside of social services to come in and do a home study with us. And I did the exact same approach. And in September, my 2 boys moved in with me. And the 2 boys and the 2 girls are 17 months apart in age for the 4 of them. And one of them, the one boy, had missed his whole first year of school because he had Hodgkin's disease. He had cancer of the lymphatic system and had his spleen taken out, and he'd been on chemotherapy for over a year. And he was given a 50-50 chance of living. And if he got it back, he was only given a 10% chance of living the cancer. So that's why. So we had 3 of them on in grade 1 all at the same time. A very interesting situation with children. And, the boys moved in and we had that, and eventually our relationship dissipated and the boys come to live with me. And so we grew up, and my sons just turned, what were they this year? 30? How was old Vince? 37. Anna's son is 2 days older than my son. And then my daughter's 3 months older than the 2 of them. So we now have 5 kids within 17 months age between the 2 of us, of our 8. Isn't that something? But anyhow, statistically, if you looked on paper, and when I tell you that story of where my life was, what would you give me the chance of being successful? Would you give me 5%? No, most people didn't even give me 5. Some didn't. Most people didn't even give me 1. Most people give me 0. And that was good people, people that knew me, people that knew I'd change and everything. They still said your chances are 0. See, you can't listen to this. Yeah, this is a sounding board out here. However, you can't necessarily always listen to this. You got to take it into consideration. You can't be stupid about things, okay? But you can't listen to this all the time, because there is a higher order at work. And if it's right, it'll work for you. It may not work the way you want it, or the way you think it should. It definitely ain't going to work the way you think it should. I can tell you that right now. If you'd ever told me I'd have been watching the TV program and found my 2 sons on that, the only time I ever seen it, I wouldn't have never believed you. By the way, I still got the video. So, okay? So, it's not about that. It's about your intention, your desire, your willingness to have faith, trust, to believe, to walk with confidence, to be persistent. And there's a fine line between being persistent and being stubborn. God only knows I'm still working with that one. You got to practice gratitude on a daily basis. I had to practice gratitude for at least having the courage and the opportunity to go through with that experience. Didn't matter what happened. I had to be grateful for the opportunity. I had to work with thanksgiving, and then I had to work with forgiveness. Because I had a lot of issues with authority. And I'm dealing with it over here. I know you find it hard to believe, but it's true. So I had to forgive everybody in authority, and I had to forgive myself. I had to release all of that. Because you see, all it is us, we're going along in life, and all of a sudden we get a stroke because there's a hardening in the arteries or a blockage there. Yeah, you see, forgiveness releases the blockages. The ones that are there that we may not even know. So we have to forgive and release old ideas, old attitudes, old emotions. And we want to give thanks. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 15 to 19, St. Paul is delivering a talk to the Thessalonians, and he made a statement. He said, "In everything give thanks." He didn't say give thanks for everything. Be clear. He said, "In everything give thanks." So in everything that you do, give thanks that it's already an accomplished fact because of the word, the declaration, and the action. He didn't say give thanks for everything, but in everything give thanks. And then the great teacher and master Jesus, he gave a little bit in Mark chapter 11, verses 22 to 24. And, everybody's having a problem with what he's doing. And he says, have faith in God. Well, what does that mean? He says, "For verily I say unto you, that whoever shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea," and here's the criteria, and first, shall not doubt, and the addendum is in his heart. Shall not doubt. That part is a mental thing. That part's easy. In his heart. Heart is the emotional part of it. That's the tough one. So shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe. Okay, so we've got to believe that those things which he hath saith come to pass, he shall have whatever he saith. And so he says, "Therefore I say to you, whatever so things you desire." So the desire's got to be there, and that desire has to be accompanied by intention. And you have to be in integrity with spiritual principles so that whatever you're working with causes no harm to anybody else. To be clear on that. Desire, and when ye pray. Now, praying isn't asking somebody outside yourself, "Oh God, would you do this to me because I'm such a kind soul?" No. Praying is taking it into spiritual context, into spiritual principle, into spiritual law. To know there is a principle in the law that flows through us that is like the soil. We plant into it and it'll bring to us whatever we plant. So, shall not doubt in his heart, but believe. And ye desire, pray, believe, and ye shall receive them, and ye shall have them. So those are the steps. So it's that faith, trust, believe, that confidence, the persistence, the gratitude, the thanksgiving, and the forgiveness. However, you need the eraser there too. Got to get this off the board. And here's the challenge, because you see, we're professionals at this. And this is where we really shine, because we can bring our doubt out any time that we need it. In fact, we don't even have to ask for it, and our doubt's there. We got to remove doubt. There's no place for it. That puts a kink in the hose. And of course, worrying. Is anybody worried? Worrying is focusing in on what you don't want, not what you do want. And then we wonder why we get what we don't want instead of what we do want, because that's what we're focused on. That's what worrying is. One of the most useless things we can occupy ourselves with, because we have no control over the future. Have you noticed that? If we did, we'd all be rich and retired. No control over that. And my favorite. Here's my favorite. Here's the one. And I work this in all my programs and courses and everything I do to the best of my ability. No attachment to the outcome. Yes, detail your goals and dreams and desires right to the degree you want. However, know that if Spirit brings it to you, it may not be like that, but it'll always be better. Nevertheless, don't limit yourself. Be open and receptive. Every time I do something detailed, this or better. No attachment to outcome. I went through a process this week where I was very clear. I had to go what I teach my students to validate and express their feeling with my boss's boss and have no attachment to outcome, and I went and did it. I thought I was pretty clear, and I walked out of the office feeling terrible. Do you know why? I did everything the right way, except I found out I had an attachment to the outcome that I didn't know I had. subtle. Anytime you have an attachment to an outcome, it's a limitation and a restriction. One example before I close, my favorite. I always wanted to go to Hawaii. Anybody want to go to Hawaii? I set a goal and I worked on it mentally for 5 years to go to Hawaii. And I'm going to go as soon as I get the money. Because I thought I needed money to go to Hawaii. That's what we all think, right? So I realized, I might have won a trip. Would I say no because I just need the money, I can't take it? I doubt it. So I realized I put myself into a limitation about how it had to happen. I took it off. My goal is, I'm going to Hawaii. Somebody could pay for me, take me, I could win a trip, who knows? 6 months, I get a call from Reverend Helen Street at the time, the minister in Honolulu. She says, Doug, I've been hearing about this strategic planning process you've been doing with some of the boards. Yeah, I heard it's pretty good. Yeah. She said, do you think you could find some time to come over to Hawaii and do it for our church board? I said, I think I could squeeze it in. She said, well, while you're over here, would you do a Sunday service and a class? Yeah, I can fit that in. She said, I got to ask you another favor. You know, we got a small outreach church in Hilo on the Big Island, and they're just starting up. And they sure use the same thing. Could you do it for them and a class and a Sunday service? Can you stay that long? I said, yeah, I can do it. I went to Hawaii for 13 or 17 days. I come home, paid my bills. I had $1,500 left over. Never did it ever cross my mind that somebody would pay me to go there. I was so astounded, I thought, this is wonderful. Can it possibly happen again? 2 years later, the same thing happened. I went to Hawaii twice. I got paid both times. Okay? So you see, folks, one of the most important things here, it's not about how you're going to achieve what it is you want. You have to go outside the grid for this target practice. You have to be really careful to follow the spiritual practice. And then when you're setting your goal, don't set the limitations to it about how it has to happen, because that's none of your business. It's none of your job to do that. That's God's job. Your job is to be willing to step into the experience and follow the lead, and then get down there and reap the reward. But don't think you're smart enough to know how it's going to happen. I made a commitment that day. I thought, from now on, I'm going to sit down and it's going to be a game for me. I'm going to try and figure out how it's going to happen. Anytime I try to do anything, I still do it. And I'm going to tell you, since I've done that, I'm batting 100%. I haven't been right yet. And it's just a game. I know it, because I keep trying to think how it's going to work, and I've never got it right. It's always, I would have never thought it would happen that way. Every time. So, target practice is being willing to look at things outside of the grid, outside of the norm. Because what I'm talking about today, it's not normal. However, it is true. And you know what? Don't believe me. Not a single word. Take it and try it. And then you'll prove it to yourself. Because, you know, Jesus said, with man, it's impossible. But with God, all things are possible. So I know for you, as I know for myself, that whatever our heart's desire is, has that element of potentiality and possibility to whatever degree that we wish to participate it in, but we must participate in at a spiritual level also, 100%, and then what we do at the physical is a complement to achieving the goal. So I know for you, as I know for myself, that each and every one of us has the courage to step up to the plate for more target practice outside that grid, and we too shall receive all that we deserve and live peacefully and experience prosperity and fulfillment, because we deserve it. And I declare it, I accept it, I know it is so, and so it is. Thank you. Thank you.